Hi everyone, welcome back to 33 Founders. I'm so excited you're with us today because I'm here with Kimberly Bryant, the founder of Black Girls Code, an incredibly special organization that's set to teach 1 million girls of color to code by 2040. Thank you so much for being with me, Kimberly.
Thank you so much for having me.
So like I shared, I'm so excited you're here because I want to dive into your work, and I was most inspired because you built Black Girls Code when you realized that you wanted your daughter to not only play video games, you wanted her to create them. Can we
Yes,
start out with your mission and what you're working so hard to accomplish?
sure. So for Black Girls Code, our mission is to change the face of technology. And that is really increasing the diversity, especially for women of color in the tech industry. We're hoping to do that by hosting these series of events and workshops and educational experiences for girls ages 7 to 17 to really introduce them to the world of technology as creators and not just consumers.
One thing that Richard Kirby, the VP over at Venrock, shared with me a while back was that when it comes to anyone who's younger thinking about considering tech, instead of just using Instagram and constantly posting pictures, they should think why they
Right.
want to use Instagram. What does that mean in the context of your program?
Well, the why in the context of our program really speaks to this whole concept that we have of shifting the focus for the girls or shifting their lens from one that's really consumer based, consumer focused, to one that's as of a creator and as an innovator and as an originator of ideas and concepts and tools. So we're really helping the girls to look at, how they engage with technology and create opportunities for them to use technology as a tool to actually, I would say, initiate change in their world. So for us, the why is, why should we create a mobile app for XYZ? Or why should we create a web page for whatever the topic is? And really always having that process and conversation at the forefront of what we do. So we're not really focused on building for building's sake necessarily, but how are we going to use this tool that we build to impact change or create change in the world?
Great. Can you run us through what it's like to be a part of the program?
Sure. So we have many different program verticals, but the primary one is a 1 day workshop that we host primarily on Saturdays. So students really have an opportunity to come to whatever workshops really resonate with them. Our programs run January through December, and girls register as open registration. There's no selection process. So the girls are able to come in and out of the classes and workshops that they really are most interested in. So 1 day event, they will come in, a girl wants to do coding with Scratch or mobile app development with App Inventor. She registers for that class, comes in on a Saturday morning, introduces her to the classmates and teams, and then really starts the whole creative process of going through idea creation, then learning to use the tool, and then creating a project at the end of all of these classes that they're sharing with their parents and peers at the end of the day.
I know your girls are doing amazing work. Can you highlight a few who have just blown you away? Maybe just this month. I'm sure it's hard to pick.
Yeah. Well, we have so many amazing students. So some of the students, some of our current students actually participated in a Global Fund for Women hackathon back in January here in San Francisco, along with teams across the globe that were all hacking in the same time period on these issues relative to creating safe spaces for women, in whatever format that may be. So we had a small group of girls, about 5 girls, ages I think around 12 to 16, that worked for 2 days on an application, and they called it Ohana, meaning no one gets left behind. And it was really just amazing from all of the graphics that they created to the name that they created. And the tool was really a wearable device that looked like a, inconspicuous piece of jewelry that a woman or girl could wear, but would also be a sensor that would connect to this mobile application. So if she was walking along home from school or out somewhere and felt unsafe, she could inconspicuously, activate this device, which would send this mobile signal to her families and friends, authorities, what have you. So to see them be able to create this, and of course, they didn't, this is the concept. So they created most of the mock mobile design, but not the wearable piece that interface it with it. But to see this very young group of girls be able to come up with this concept and create it over 2 days was just amazing to watch. So in this global competition, they were one of the top 3 apps that were selected for recognition among many groups that were like several years older than them. So I was just blown away by their ingenuity, and also that they created this app because it really spoke to me in a way about how the girls feel about creating something that made them feel safer and issues that they may actually encounter in the world.
Yeah, it directly goes back to the why. Why are you doing it?
Absolutely. So, I wasn't necessarily expecting to see that. So it just totally, blew my mind, even though, I'm familiar with the students, but I didn't really realize until seeing what they came up with, how these issues like Bring Back Our Girls, etc., may be impacting them in terms of what they see and what they feel on a day-to-day basis.
You mentioned that the girls who created Ohana were younger, and that directly lends to the pipeline issues I was excited to learn about when I was researching Black Girls Code. 50% of middle school girls are interested in computer science, and then once they get to high school, that drops to 2%.
Yes.
What's happening here?
Well, middle school, as I say, is it's really a pivotal age, especially for girls. So there's lots of things that happen with girls around middle school. So they're really figuring out who they are, figuring out who they want to be in the world. It's really a point for them of self-actualization, I would like to say. But what happens also around that time is middle school boys are at their probably highest peak of really being domineering in the classroom. And a lot of times educators feed to that. So a lot of what we see in terms of girls and what happens around middle school is that they are not being given the correct messages, that they are good in math, that they are good in science, that they are capable. And that really plays a part in them taking themselves out of the game in terms of going through math and science. So that's important. That's why role models are critically important, especially during that age. And also really making sure that there are programs, like Black Girls Code and others that focus directly on girls. So, we've been really adamant about having these workshops that focus on girls and creating a safe space and environment that empowers the girls. Because we know all of these things like stereotype threat, all of those things play out even in middle school girls, in the classroom and what they see and if they feel that they belong. So we're trying to reverse that perception and give them the skills and the self-confidence to stay the path until they get through high school. So I think this girls only spaces is able to do that. But I also think it definitely takes some focus on how administrators and teachers are interacting and the messages that they're giving to students, especially girls at this critical point.
What do you think that educators can do to move that forward? And one of the things that I dislike the most is when they say, so what's it like being a female engineer? Right.
I definitely think that I always say language matters. So, it's really important that we expose the language that tends to disempower female students as opposed to empower them. And make sure our messages are the same for girls rather than boys all through the cycle of their childhood. So a big thing for me that I really don't like is this pink aisle in the toy store that has all of the girls related type of toys because my daughter was never that type of girl. So she was not a little bit into dolls maybe, but not really. She was into the building toys and the Legos, the blocks. She's a builder. And so those are things that appeal to her. But, when you go into the toy store, is very evident about what aisles they expect boys to be on and what aisles they expect the girls to be on. So changing, how we kind of create this gender division for kids is very, very important, especially if we want the industry to become more diverse and more inclusive.
So, skipping ahead a little bit past the education sector, something you've shared before that I thought was really impactful is that organizations should create programs where their engineers can go and give back. Are there any organizations right now who you feel are doing a great job with that?
There's one that comes to mind for sure is Google. Now, Google has always had this 10% time before that they would give to their employees to do passion projects. And now they have kind of flipped that or used that or replicated that. So they're giving their employees this 10% time to go back and do community programs, community outreach. So I think that's a great model for other companies to follow. There are other companies that do similar things in a less formal way, but we work with lots of different, both tech companies and non-tech companies, and all of them, without a doubt, every single one of them is looking for employment engagement opportunities for their workforce. So I think really finding ways that we can engage them and pull them into schools so that those mentors are working with schools. All of those type of programs are important. Another organization that has a great program that they created to do just this is Microsoft with their TILS program that actually puts a working software engineer in a classroom with a teacher for a semester to teach computer science. So I think that is what we need to see in public education, because we really don't have the resources from the teacher standpoint to teach technology courses. So we have to tap into this really rich resource pool of technical employees to kind of make this change we're hoping to see in the schools.
When it comes to making that change, something that you shared before that has stuck with me since I read it is that it takes bravery to admit that with the best intentions we are flawed.
Yes.
Tell me more about that.
That was from a speech that I gave during the 99U conference recently in New York City. And it was really focused on this issue of implicit bias. So often I think when we look at this diversity issue or this diversity and inclusion problems, we focus on the big issues. So like, when is diversity, or when is there a lack of inclusion that's very specific that you can nail and say this was discrimination, or this was something that was done intentionally, intentional bias that impacted how women or people of color are presented with opportunities. But a lot of what we're seeing now is not necessarily the intentional explicit biases, those implicit messages, those implicit actions that tend to create lack of opportunities for people that fit into these stereotypical forms to be able to move forward. And everyone has that. I have biases. I am a woman of color. Good people have biases. So I think, being able to own up to the fact that there's bias that I intentionally or unintentionally bring to the table with me in everything that I do, understanding that allows you to move forward. It was interesting that when I gave that presentation and we looked at some of the feedback afterwards, a lot of people said, I just can't relate with this. I've never experienced it, etc. And I was like, well, that is the point. You don't realize you're not being cognizant of the fact that you bring bias to the things that you do. And I think that's the conversation in this diversity discussion that we need to have now. Not saying that we leave the systemic issues to the wayside. I think it's still important to focus on that. But how are these implicit issues of bias impacting us being able to move the needle?
What are some questions you think that we can just ask ourselves personally to uncover that?
I think one of the things that I really found as I was researching that whole speech was there are lots of great tools out there that you can take a bias test and see how your bias plays out. And MTV did some fantastic work with that on bias and and they have it all, they have all the YouTube videos up around that. And I think that's, a great tool. But just asking, like, when I'm looking at a position, or even for me, when someone's coming into Black Girls Code to apply for an open position on our team, how do I rate those candidates? What do I look for? Am I looking at things through my lens as a woman of color and looking for people that fit in that category? Or I'm looking for someone a little bit different than me, that sees things different than me, that has a different life experience? I have to do that because I went through this process when we were starting to add to our team, and the first employees that we hired didn't really work out too well. And I was like, this is not working. What am I doing? I'm a failure at being able to build a team. This is like, I just can't do it. I was like really devastated. And after a while, and as we started to like backfill and, change folks out, I realized that I was definitely hiring through my lens. I was very subjective in the hiring process. Yes, I would read the resume, and yes, I would, bring people in the interview. But in many cases, I hired people that kind of approach the problem similar to the way I would. That doesn't always work. So even on my team, I have to have diversity. I always say there probably only needs to be one hyper aggressive woman of color on my team, because that'd probably be the role that I have. And so how do I get a balance? Because I must have, folks that are on my team that really balance out what are my weak points, what are my strengths, and how do we balance that as a team? So building in diversity into our hiring process by using more objective tools has helped us to kind of move towards that better place in terms of building a really diverse culture in Black Girls Code.
Yeah, I just read that we tend to hire people who are similar to us, and I was like, no,
Yes.
no, just like you did. And I realized even in my friend, like my best friend and I are nearly exactly the same.
Yeah.
We do everything, and it's great because she's my best friend, but
Yes.
we have the same hobbies, we do the same work, like everything is.
Absolutely. So, and I think that's a bias. So I don't think all bias is necessarily negative bias, but we still have to be able to, really see and reflect on, how bias impacts the work that we do in order to get past it.
I want to shift gears for a couple of minutes and chat about mentorship, because I know that was very big in your life and it's a big part of the program. Let's start out with the mentor that you had at Vanderbilt, who you shared as one of the reasons that you stayed in tech.
Well, my mentor at Vanderbilt was really an informal mentor, and it was, it's still one of my closest friends. I tended to have upper class female women leaders that were in my friend circle and who became my mentors. But this mentor that I speak about often is my good friend Sylvia, who and now is a PhD, head of an engineering department in Florida. I met her randomly as a freshman walking on campus to class one day. And someone introduced us, and I found out she was in engineering. Then she told me she was in electrical engineering. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then, it was just that bond and that familiarity that we shared as women of color in the School of Engineering that created this tremendous mentoring relationship that lasted, throughout college and even now beyond that. And I think that was a critical point for me, especially as an electrical engineer, which was a field that didn't really have many women. We didn't have many women in our department, and we certainly didn't have many women of color. So having someone that I could talk to about, okay, this is what I'm struggling with in freshman year. Next year, what should be looking at? Which instructors should I take? Which ones are going to be most helpful? Having someone to kind of help me steer my path and navigate the ups and downs was absolutely critical for me being able to survive, 4 years of engineering school. So without that, I probably would not have lasted because it was extremely difficult. So for me, I think that's why I value mentorship so much. I've even had mentors throughout my career, and those relationships have helped me to get to the next stage. At every point, it's been those mentor relationships that kind of given me the wisdom and given me the guidance giving me the encourage to, to stay the journey. So for me, I think I really relish the students and the young women, and even some young men that I've been able to mentor and give it back, because I know that, how important that was for me. And I try to also relate and give that back as well.
When it comes to working with kids too, I know it's a lot different. When you were an engineering student, you had the drive to, I got to finish school, I want to get a job. But when you're 12 or 13, sometimes it's in the moment, oh my God, I'm going to be a coder. And then it's like, oh, well, it's time for dinner now. So that's done. How do you get through to them?
Well, one of the things that I always tell people is that, for us, the generation that we are working with, I think they're Generation X or something, they are very career oriented. They're very different than Gen Y, like totally different. So we do these quarterly mentee dinners with a small group of our students, as well as women that are leaders and working in industry. And we're always like blown away with the questions they ask and the things they're focused on. Like they're focused on things like, well, I'm really worried about how I'm going to pay all these taxes when I get older. And I need to go and take all these classes because I don't want all this college debt. And these are like 12, 13, 14, 15-year-olds. And they're very clear about what they want to do. So I'm like just really, really, really bullish about this next generation because I feel that they have all the skills. They really socially conscious. They're really career focused. They're really inclusive in terms of their thinking. They just are kind of like these Renaissance kids, I think, that will be able to kind of like move so many things culturally and socially forward in the next couple of generations. So it's not very hard, actually, to answer your question. Long way of answering your question. It's not very hard to mentor these girls because they're very focused and they're very, very, very serious about what they want to do. And oftentimes they want to do like 3 or 4 different careers in their lifetime. And we're like, well, if that's what you want to do, you can certainly do it. So it's been really a pleasure to mentor these younger students.
That goes directly into what you shared in your TEDx talk, where you said that your work is revolutionary because you want to empower young women to see no limitations for themselves as creators and having the divine skills and innate ability to create change in their lives and in their communities. Tell me more about that in the long-term perspective of Black Girls Code.
Well, I often say, and I often said this in a recent short talk that I gave, that when I reflect on, legacy and what that means to me, I think about the women like my mother, like my aunts, like my grandmother that were born in the 20s and in the 30s and grew up during segregation and Jim Crow in the South. And the opportunities they didn't have to do what they wanted to do. So my mother always said she thought she would be an opera singer. That's what she liked. So this is like growing up in the 40s and 50s. But folks told her, no, that's not something for you. That's not what little brown girls that look like you do. So that's not something she ever pursued. That's not something she ever, had the motivation or even felt compelled to like really push towards. I don't want the girls that are coming through our programs and in this generation to feel they have any limitations. And so without a doubt, when I started Black Girls Code, it was because of that revelation for me and understanding, some of the no's that I got throughout my career and as I was growing up that could have impacted my path. And so once I realized that my daughter would possibly be following in my footsteps, through this rocky road and technology and engineering, that was a bit of the turning point for me because I did not want her to I knew she would receive no's, but I didn't want the no to impact her. I didn't want her to think she could not get past the no to get to the yes or to and whatever she wanted to be. So for this work that we're doing with Black Girls Code, it really is about painting a vision for the girls that they may or may not have currently, and then really giving them the self-confidence and the self-efficacy to know that whatever it is that they want to achieve, If they put in the work, if they learn the skill sets and really have this self-belief, they can get there. And we're going to be there, to help guide them and push them along the way.
How can organizations or just individuals support you guys?
Our vision with Black Girls Code is pretty big. We want to reach 1 million girls by the year 2040. And that's going to take a lot of work, and that's going to take a lot of collaboration and community building to get there. So we're always looking for folks in terms of community leaders to connect with us as we grow the program across the U.S. and abroad, so folks can connect that way. Folks that are working with companies and bringing skill sets to the table can also come in and become mentors and become teachers and trainers within our programs. And absolutely, giving back in terms of, sponsoring events in their cities or getting their companies to sponsor some of the work that we're doing are always ways that folks can help us kind of grow the program and kind of join the mission of Black Girls Code.
So right now you guys have 700 chapters, right, in the U.S.?
7.
Oh, 7. Okay. Never
Yes,
mind. I was like, that is a lot.
No, I like that. I like the way you think. But it's only 7 currently.
7 here and then 1 in Johannesburg, right?
Yes.
So of course we have to expect the 700, but what can we expect in the next couple of years in the expansion of that?
We're hoping to double that number in the next couple of years. So we're opening up in the next 7 days, actually, in Raleigh, North Carolina and Washington, D.C. We're hoping to get lunch in Miami as well as in Dallas, Texas this year as well. And also have our eyes set on Boston, Minneapolis, and Los Angeles. And hoping to hit those goals in the next, I would say, 12 months or so. And then also looking to expand on other programs that we launched this year, like Code, which is called Code Clubs, which are actually in-school programs that we're doing in collaboration with schools and community organizations that are after-school programs right on the school campus. So that is definitely one way we see to reach that exponential growth and hit those 700 chapters in the next couple of years.
So 700's got to be the big number now.
Yeah, I know. That might be prophetic. I have to write that down.
So 2 more questions,
All right.
Kimberly. Like, we're just talking about your time at the 99U conference, and I saw so many posts on social media that it was the most empowering 20 minutes of people's time there. You said that we need to move from sympathy to empathy to overcome our fear of the other. I took a lot of time to think about that. And when I really got it, it's incredibly moving. Tell me more.
Well, I think one of the things that we're seeing is a huge shift in our society currently, where there's movements happening all over. So not just here in the U.S., just everywhere. There's movements. And I think one way that these movements can become inclusive is not if we move past this tendency we have to other. So those folks that are out there protesting today, they don't represent me because I've never experienced this. I'm not a person of color or whatever it is that excludes you from the group that is pushing for change and finding the place of that shared humanity. And that requires empathy. So, I can sympathize with what happens in Ferguson and say that's so terrible that happened. But where does that get you in terms of hoping to drive this positive social change that's necessary? You have to move behind just feeling sorry about what happened and understanding it, seeing it from the lens of those folks that are impacted by this action. So I think that's what I was trying to get to there, is that sympathy is great, but sympathy doesn't drive change. It's when we can relate to another and see things through a different lens that we have on a day-to-day basis, where we can actually find a way to help drive this positive change in the world.
Jeez, Kimberly, that is like my heart is pounding. You're rocking this. You need to just, I'm going to have a list of quotes from you with 700 on top as a prophetic number, like you said.
I know.
And then when you guys get to 700, I'll be like, I don't know, I predicted it was.
Yes, absolutely.
So my last question is actually, what's one thing that a question or even a small part of Black Girls Code that you've always wanted to be asked about, but no one's ever asked you?
I would say, if I wasn't doing Black Girls Code, what would I be doing?
What would you be doing?
And I don't know what I would be doing. I don't know. I mean, so nobody ever asked me that, but I don't know. But my goal originally was to start a startup company in the health tech area. So I may be doing that, but I don't know, because I really feel like I was not planning to start a nonprofit. I could probably be doing something else a lot more profitable. But this is where I feel I'm called to be right now. So, not saying that this is what I'll be doing forever. But I definitely, I hear it very strongly on a day-to-day basis that for whatever reason, I was called to do this work through my vision and through help of many folks that kind of share this vision. And I'm right where I'm supposed to be right now.
I think that's the perfect way to end it. Thank you so much for being with me. I can't wait to watch you guys get to 700. How can everyone stay up to date with your work and contribute?
Definitely reach out and connect to us. They can go to our website on blackgirlscode.com, our social media on Facebook or Twitter, and join our mailing list, join our volunteer list. We love our community and they make our work happen. So love to have folks connect with us.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.